I listened to your opening comments there, and I've got to be honest and say I disagree with much of what you said because actually I think we're doing a pretty good job. One of the things that you said is correct, which is there are aberrations there that you even when you're monitoring somebody 24 hours a day, it can happen so quickly that you can't stop it. But when you look at the inputs to the Prevent program, and they average around about 6 to 8,000 people a year, and the outputs in terms of anybody that goes on to reoffend. In any other program, you would consider that to be a success.
I think a lot of people would, and I really want to get your input on this Prevent programme, so I'm very glad you brought it up as immediately as you have, because a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, but it's a fact, a lot of people are sick and tired of hearing that this lot were known to authorities. They were known to authorities. They were known. And so actually, I think it's fair enough for a lot of people to question whether or not the Prevent programme is actually that good.
Yeah, so the fact that people are known to the authorities doesn't mean to say that somebody's been into the Prevent programme. Those two things are not the same. And I would agree with you that it's incredibly frustrating when we see attacks delivered by people who have been on, using the vernacular, the authorities' radar. That can mean many, many things. And of course, you've then got to put that into the context of a liberal society. So, for example, if an individual, say at 17 years old, espouses extreme beliefs, is looked at by the authorities, it's decided that they don't present a threat and that's just something that they're going through, and you might put an intervention in to help them understand that what they thought was wrong. But then 6 years later, 7 years later, they go and do something. I'm not sure that represents failure by the authorities, because what we don't understand with a lot of these people is what are the triggers that might bring somebody back into turning a previously toxic ideology into an action, despite the fact that they've been absolutely passive for several years.
Well, let's start with what you view as being the classic signs of radicalisation. What are some of those red flags?
Well, look, there are some very obvious overt ones, and they're the easy ones to spot, which is quite often people are aligning themselves to symbology. When you look at the government's Act Early website, there's a story of a woman there who, saw her son looking at neo-Nazi material online and having neo-Nazi material on the walls of his bedroom. And let's hope that all of us could spot that and would feel we should do something about it. But then there are less subtle signs, which might be in terms of people's articulation of mainstream religion and mainstream ideology into a slightly twisted view of that. Now, I'm certainly not an expert on Islam or the Quran, and therefore I couldn't give you an example of that. But those are the sorts of things that people refer to. It's a hardening of the view and a hardening of the interpretation of some of the things that they see. And similarly, you talk about Islamism and the right wing. This isn't just an Islamist problem. It really is not. When you look at the totality of people that go into the Prevent programme, approximately 50% of that 6 to 8,000 have got no clear defined ideology. They really don't know what it is that they stand for, but they are quite prepared to espouse violent or extremist views. And when you look at the other 50%, it's about half and half Islamism and extreme right wing.
Those 50% that you just said there that seem to have no particular views whatsoever, what differentiates them from just people in gangs? I mean, they're stabbing it to the left, right and centre as well. I mean, what's the difference between them? Why are they in the Prevent programme and not gang members, or are they?
Well, there are commonalities between people, particularly youths, in terms of violence in their normal life and moving into extremist ideologies. I think there's a tendency there more in the right wing, possibly, than there is in Islamism. But there are similar programs that are run for people who find themselves caught up in gang culture. So there's not an exclusivity, it's just branded differently and aligned to resolving the problem for different reasons.
Yeah, I think there was one standout case for me where I can not get my head around why we didn't act sooner, and that is the case of Quram Butt, who was one of the many Borough Market attackers. Now, he was pictured unfurling an ISIS flag in Regent's Park and featured in a documentary called Jihadi Next Door. Now, that to me would have seemed like quite a big flag, a red flag, sorry. We didn't seem to act there, but we're a bit pressed for time. I understand the odd person may well slip through the net, although that does seem a bit extreme, but for want of a better phrase. But the case of Usman Khan, of course, the fishmonger's hall, attacker I'm sure you're aware of, he was a poster boy for de-radicalisation, wasn't he? And that's one of the big questions for us today. How can you ever truly know if someone's been de-radicalised?
So I'm not sure that you can, and I think most experts will agree that you can't necessarily. It's not a switch in the brain that you can turn on and off. What you can do is you can engage with people as best as you can, and you can bring in your best efforts to interpret how that person is responding to whatever measures you're putting in around them. I think the prison service are best placed to comment on how de-radicalisation programs work inside prisons. However, I am aware that there are few people who are really capable of arguing the rights and wrongs of ideologies, particularly around Islam, and in terms of having that deep, profound knowledge of what the Quran and what the religion stands for. And then of those people, there's probably fewer that can hold an articulate argument with somebody who needs to be de-radicalised and have their view of the world changed.
Nick, very grateful for your time. Thank you very much. Really insightful stuff.